Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. My name is Vipin Verma. I'm an attorney. I practice in Daytona Beach, Florida. I grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida. I went to Port Orange Elementary School, Silver Sands Middle School, and Spruce Creek High School. They're all located in Port Orange, Florida. And then I went to University of Florida for undergrad, studied biochemistry, and after that I attended law school at Florida State College of Law. Came back in Daytona Beach, started my own practice, and I've been practicing for the past couple of years. So here's why I decided to run. I see our nation, especially the debt ceiling debate, that was the triggering decision. I watched the Congress, it's a very serious debate going on. There's a global turmoil going on. A lot of people are out of a job. And then you see Congress bickering and fighting over it. And then you saw the result. You saw the results, nobody wanted to compromise. And essentially what happened is we lost our AAA credit rating. And and if you read the actual report, it goes into why they downgraded us, is because they saw the stability of our Congress being able to come to an agreement is not stable anymore as it used to be. That's basically the main reason why they downgraded us. So essentially, after I saw this, and especially with you see a lot of these congressmen who are in there trying to push their agendas, their ideology, oh, we're not going to raise taxes, we don't want to cut this spending, we don't want to cut this program, but they don't want to work together to come towards a solution. And that's what people are looking for. People now need a solution. They need to find a way to get the economy back up and running, and that's what I want to do. My main emphasis for this election is I would like to bring a high-tech manufacturing sector in each part of my district. I was just in Palatka the other day, and they were telling me, we can really use the industry, and if you expand the highways, if you look at Palatka, where it can serve as a hub for Gainesville, St. Augustine, and Jacksonville, and they're saying we're dying for an industry. And that's what I want to give them. I want to give basically each part of the district, Volusia County, St. Johns County, Flagler, and Palatka, Putnam County, give them each district, and I will let them decide on the local level, what kind of industry they want to bring in. Bring in some sort of high-tech industry that can lead them into the future. A lot of this district is a coastal district. I grew up in Daytona Beach, very heavily on tourism. So what happens when the economy goes down? And now we're in a global economy. So it doesn't even have to be a crisis here in the United States. It could be a global currency crisis like we're having in Europe. So a lot of the tourism dollars dries up. And what do you have to do? You have to cut a lot of the services at the local level. So that's where if you have a secondary industry and a high-tech industry that includes robotics, nanotechnology, high turbine engines, and biomedical research, those are the waves of the future. And if you can tie those industries and lure these industries to come here and settle in our communities, we can take a lot of these college students. I know a lot of engineering students. I had a lot of friends from the University of Florida who were engineering students. They got their degree and they didn't come back to their hometown like I did. They went either to the Northeast or they went to California because that's where the jobs are. And I would like to change that philosophy and kind of bring those jobs back in the home district. And I would like to see a lot of my friends or the future students who are going to University of Florida, Florida State, and Miami to come back to their hometown and contribute to the economy. I think that's the way we can kind of grow our economy. And if you think about it, if you bring the high-tech sector, all these people are going to need housing, they need entertainment. So you're essentially building the economy from the ground up. And that's what I would like to see. And that's one of the main reasons I decided to run.
I can see the governor making that argument because the governor, county commissioners, and others would have a say in that. How would a U.S. congressman have, what role would a U.S. congressman have in attracting high-tech industries to, say, St. Johns County?
You can do it from federal tax incentives. Mm-hmm. The way you structure, and you have to be very careful how you structure the tax incentive. You don't ever want the taxpayers to be holding, because there's a lot of companies out there who look for the tax incentive and they said we're just going to get the tax incentive, and sometimes they don't ever open up the shop, or they just open up the shop to just get the tax credits and then they close it soon after. So the way you structure, let's say you're going to take it to the highest level. Let's say if you open a new manufacturing plant, and a lot of these corporations who are Fortune 500 companies, they have $2 to $3 trillion in outside of capital reserves that are outside this country. What I would like is have the incentive at the federal level to give them the tax incentives to tell them bring this money back. And let's assume we're going to tell them, if you invest in manufacturing, right now if you bring the money back from other countries, the tax rate is 35%. Let's say we're going to give you 0%. Bring all this money back and invest in our communities. So it's up to, and then we have to work at the local level with the governor to try to lower these industries in the states. But at the federal level, you tell them we're going to give you the tax incentive to bring this capital back into the United States. And then on top of that, if you're going to build a manufacturing plant, what we're going to do is say for your profits for the first 3 years, we'll give you full tax benefits on those profits. But what you have to do is you have to pay into the system. So for your first year's profit, you would pay for first, second, and third year. So if we're going to take the profits for the first 3 years, but the first year profits are redeemable in the fourth year, second year in the fifth year, third in the sixth year. So at least you have to have a 6-year business plan. And if you're doing this long-term investment, you're investing millions of dollars of your own capital. And it doesn't cost the taxpayer that much in the beginning because it's a rebate towards the end, and you help the economy grow. And hopefully by that time, the economy would have rebounded and we can afford to give them the tax credits. So that's how you structure it, so whereas the taxpayers are never left holding the bag essentially for these companies who try to find these tax credits. So that's how you can do it at the federal level, trying to get the policy in place to encourage these companies who are holding on to all these capital reserves to invest back in our communities. And like I said, you would give it up to the local commissioners and to decide what kind of industries and companies do they want to lure in their district, because they know their district much better than me, to see what kind of industry would be good for St. Johns County, especially in the northeast area here. Maybe you can bring in some of the defense contractors because you have a huge military base there. So you can try to bring in the defense for Volusia County. Volusia County is a very diverse population, so you can do any high-tech industry would be possible. Putnam County, they really would like to expand their resources. I was talking to the city commissioner, Kenny Eubanks, and he was telling me he would like to expand, try to get some more energy industry, because that's where he sees the future, or anything in high-tech. And he says, he has the resources and he knows how he can train the workforce to get them to be qualified for those jobs and start putting people back to work.
Okay. You mentioned the debt ceiling. Clearly that was a divisive issue. Let's talk about Social Security and Medicare. Would you favor raising the age of eligibility for Social Security?
Well, anything you do with Social Security and Medicare, and the programs are separate. So let's see, Social Security, if you look at the actual structural problems, it's not as severe as they are with Medicare. So Social Security, there are much simpler fixes with Social Security. And I don't think you have to go to increasing the age, or you have to talk about serious reforms of how you can accomplish our goal for Social Security. And one of the solutions might be raising the rates, even though I'm not in favor of that. But you have to get at least the discussion going, see what our problem is, and see how we can just resolve this solution. There's a lot of people, but you have to get beyond this rhetoric we have in the Republican Party of calling it a Ponzi scheme. A lot of people paid money into it. And I've talked to wealthy individuals who tell me, I've structured my retirement, and that $1,000 or $1,200, whatever they're going to get from Social Security, they factor that into their retirement plan. So if you tell them, he's like, I understand the argument why you're saying, oh, the wealthy individual, we can means test or we can do this. He's like, well, that's not what was told to me when I was paying into the system. They told me it's my retirement plan, and I factored this into my retirement, and I planned my retirement out. I didn't do anything wrong, so why should I be penalized just because I have more money? And they have a valid argument there. So that's why you have to kind of find out what we can do at the federal level to kind of make the Social Security whole. And a couple of proposals have been out there discussing Social Security. The ones on Medicare, there's another problem.
Let's do Social Security first. Stay with Social Security first. What I'm hearing you say is, one, that you would not favor raising the age. You would not favor means testing it. Is that correct?
What you have to do is you have to bring transparency into the process. That's another problem. I would like to set Social Security trust fund to be segregated. And another thing you have to drum up support if you're talking about some of these retirement age. When you send people their statement, tell them, this is how much you paid into Social Security, this is how much benefits you're getting out of it. So people understand, because a lot of people pay a lot less into Social Security than the benefits they get out of it, especially the longer they live. So I think if people understand that's what's going on in their system, I think they will be much more lenient. You would have much more of a cooperation of deciding what to do with Social Security. And like I said, Social Security gaps are very small, and you can do small reforms. There's survivors benefits, some of these other benefits. Rather than increasing the age, you can look at some of these other benefits that are increased after the initial Social Security, see if you can make some cutbacks there. Rather than, always, anytime you can eliminate any fraud and abuse, you can do technological innovation to kind of improve the process. You can cut a lot of the administrative costs at the Social Security level, turn it into a completely online and automated system where you can cut a lot of costs. And I think we can have a lot of savings there. And if you bring transparency into the process where everybody understands what's going on with Social Security and segregate that fund completely, so people understand this is how much you paid into it, this is how much money is currently available. And if you start putting some of those statistics on the statements, I think you'll have a lot of bipartisan support of how we should reform it.
Okay. One of the proposals out there is to change the formula in which raises or cost of living increase is done, and they're saying that the formula they use now, if they change the formula, you'd get smaller increases, and it would save big money over time, because so many people, as the baby boom bubble works its way through. Would you favor that, changing the formula for which people get cost of living?
Well, I think right now, any changes you want to do, I think it's better to structure the changes on the back end rather than going to a change right now. So what I mean by that is right now, a lot of people, if you look at some of the rates, there are 30–40% of people are just above the poverty line because they have Social Security. So if you start cutting benefits for the people who are relying on it today, and who are getting these benefits today, and if you start changing the formulas for them, I think it makes it much more harder for them to survive.
Just for the record, no one's proposing cutting the benefits. I've not heard that proposal.
No.
It just simply is the cost of living
Increases.
Formula, just changing it so that it is not as high. They're saying that right now it's artificially high. Last year they gave, what, 3%, I think, and we didn't have 3% inflation. So the argument is it should be more in line with what's actually happening.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with those type of proposals. You know, if the inflation is not there and if it's artificially high, you can always reduce some of the benefits. But if you can try to bring in line with the marketplace. But I think one of the arguments is, you know, if we have superinflation, which a lot of people are worried about, if let's say inflation goes up to 6%, there's no way Social Security will be able to offer that at 6% next year. So that's why some of the people are worried that if you start cutting it now, especially since now, even a lot more people are relying on Social Security even more because their 401ks or any other retirement savings have gone down. So I think our first goal should be made to make the economy rebound. If you make the economy rebound, you get a lot more people into the workforce, a lot more people start paying in, and a lot of these structural deficits that are built into Social Security will kind of resolve itself. The other problem is, should we go in Medicare now?
Sure, let's go in Medicare.
Okay, let's go in Medicare. Medicare, the biggest problem I have with the Republicans, they want to turn the Paul Ryan budget, he's tried to done this 2 times now, trying to turn it into a voucher program, and they wanted to give a $6,000 voucher, I believe it is. And you know, if you talk to young people, you try to find out, you know, I know people how much they pay for insurance, and if you talk to them, $6,000 is not going to cover seniors. There's no way it's going to be enough to cover the seniors. You know, because if you talk about 30, 35-year-olds who have a family, you know, $6,000, they're not going to get the insurance, especially to the level they're getting under Medicare with that voucher program. So essentially what you're doing is you're giving the voucher program, which is saying after that you're out left on your own. And I don't think we can do that with Medicare. I think we have to get away with that rhetoric and trying to talk about just, you know, giving a voucher program, turning Medicare, which is essentially a guaranteed program, into a voucher program, and saying after that voucher you're on your own. Especially considering how successful the Medicare program is. You know, there's always fraud and abuses, and I think we should cut down on those fraud and abuses, try to focus on that system. And then you have to talk about, you know, the overall healthcare system. And that I think that's where you kind
of... I hear where you're going, but what Representative Ryan, for better or worse, has come up with a proposal. I haven't seen one from the Democrats. But everyone agrees, it's bipartisan agreement that there's a problem with the cost of Medicare. There isn't bipartisan agreement on what the solution is. What is the solution to control the cost of Medicare? You've heard the Republicans, which is basically have you, the person, put more skin in the game, and you'll control whether you need that procedure or not. So that's their philosophy, is you having more skin in the game. But I mean,
you can give a lot more decisions to the people. I'm not opposed to that. But when you turn into a voucher program, that's not what the voucher program is meant to. The voucher program is saying you're reliant on your own for your insurance policy. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the solutions you can have for Medicare is you can bring a lot more people into not the Medicare system. If you have a lot more people have health insurance, the cost of the overall Medicare system and the cost of overall health care will go down. And that's one of the things that the Affordable Care Act was supposed to do. It's supposed to bring down the overall cost of health care. And that's how you solve some of the structural deficit. If the overall cost of health care goes down, health care for seniors will go down. And that's where if you get all these people into the insurance plan. And that's how you can kind of bring down some of the costs. And that's what it's supposed to do. And you know, we'll see how the Supreme Court turns out on the decision and what the future of healthcare would be. But the goal of healthcare should be, you know, we made a promise to our seniors, and I think and we're not alone in the world with all the Western civilization. And a lot of even the third world countries are coming around to this philosophy that we have to We have to protect the people who are most vulnerable. And a lot of the seniors, if you take the Medicare system away, they won't have a healthcare system. A lot of them will not be able to afford healthcare. And we as a society cannot make that choice to tell our seniors, you're on your own. We're not going to provide you healthcare.
Okay, but let me just ask again. What is the what Democratic proposal would you favor, or if there isn't one, what proposal would you seek that the Democrats introduce to control, which is a big problem. The cost of Medicare, it's like the Pac-Man. It's just going to eat up the federal budget and it'll become prohibitively expensive.
Yeah. I mean, just my main focus is anything you can do to bring down the overall cost of healthcare. I think that'll help solve a lot of our problems with the healthcare system, and especially for the people we have promised. If you want to reform the healthcare system, the Medicare system for the future generations, a lot of people have private insurance, and a lot of them want to. If you can develop a plan where you can get a lot of these people who are younger, much younger, and tell them, we're going to revolutionary change the Medicare system, but it's going to be for the 25, 30 years old, rather than people who are close to 50, who haven't had an opportunity to plan for not having that Medicare system in place. I understand there's a lot of structural deficit, and that's where if you bring down the overall cost of healthcare, any program that essentially brings down the overall cost of healthcare will help solve some of the Medicare problems. And if you want to reform the system, I think you do it in the back end rather than trying to go for the people who are already in the system or soon to get into the system.
No, nobody, to my knowledge, is proposing any change for those people who are 55 and older.
Well, so somebody who's 55, let's look at an example of somebody who's 50, even someone who's 50. Right now at 50, he knows he's going to get health care from the Medicare system. And a lot of the people, even if you talk about, a lot of the healthcare, a lot of the companies, even if you work for a good company, they're only going to provide you health care until you're essentially an employee, until you retire at 65. They don't have provisions in place, and none of the companies that I know of provide health care unless you're an executive. If you're just an employee of a company, they're not going to provide you health care benefits into your retirement. So unless you have a system where you want to transfer a lot of that responsibility on the corporations or to the employers, where they would help subsidize some of those costs, I don't understand where a 50-year-old, even a 50-year-old, is supposed to go, or how is supposed to start saving for his Medicare plan, especially in this economy. So even if you're 50, you're about to reach retirement. And a lot of people, they're forced into retirement at 60 or 62 because they can't find another job. And once you're that old, it's a lot of companies don't want to hire you because you're only going to be working for a couple of years. They'd rather hire a cheaper employee who's much younger. So if you're 58, 59, and you're out of a job, or if you're 50 right now, in 6, 7 years from now, if you're out of a job, so you're saying essentially not only that you're not going to have Medicare 5 years from now, just subsidizing that cost for 5 years is high enough for an employee who's not working. So if you're telling them after 65, you're going to have to subsidize it even more. The government's only going to give a voucher program or a size of $6,000. And I think you're asking for an unfair burden to take on to those individuals.
I get that, but I just can't get my arms around. I understand your objection to Representative Ryan's plan. I mean, you're not alone in that. A lot of the Democrats are in agreement on that. I'm just trying to find out what the Democratic plan is. You know that the Republicans have criticized and said, hey, we came up with a proposal, you're shooting it down, but you don't have a proposal. So I'm trying to find, and no one knows what's going to happen in the Supreme Court next week, but certainly from the oral arguments, it appears that
I think the Democratic proposal was the Affordable Care Act. Yeah. That was the Democratic proposal. You get everybody into the system. So when you have everybody in the system, a lot of people, if you're 45, 50, and you're not in those type of jobs where you have good health insurance, a lot of people avoid putting off, even if they have heart problems, they'll go see a doctor. But they're not going to get the real treatment until they're on Medicare. And if you have everyone in the health insurance policy, everyone has good health insurance where they can get the treatment, you can do a lot of preventive care. I think that's where the focus was, and that was supposed to bring down the overall cost. So when these people, these individuals who are 45, 50, if they have access to good health care, when they get to be 65, they're not going to need all the services because they're in a much healthier state than they would have been 10 years ago because they didn't have access to the right health care. And that's how the whole system, whole cost for the entire system, it was supposed to go down. And we'll see what happens with that, and I think we might have to go back to the drawing board if the individual mandate is struck down or if the whole law is struck down. So I think the main emphasis, I think the Democratic proposal was to take the Affordable Care Act, bring down the overall cost, And we'll see how the overall costs are coming down, because you'll find that the plan hasn't even been implemented. It was supposed to be implemented in 2014. And after a couple of years, you'll get a good idea of how much costs are going down and the new people who are coming into the system. But the idea was they'll be much healthier than the previous generation, and the overall costs will go down. And then we see the difference between the overall cost going down, what the balance is, and then discuss what the solution is for the difference there of how we're going to solve that structural deficit, rather than talking about the deficit assuming that everybody's going to be as sick or even more sick. Some of the proposals assume that our next generation is going to be even more sicker than the current generation. There's a lot of baby boomers, and a lot of them are going to come into the system, especially with the economy going down. A lot of them don't have health care anymore, so they're going to be much more sicker when they come into the system at 65 rather than they are in the current generation. And I think Affordable Care Act was supposed to reverse that trend, where the people coming into the Medicare system would be much healthier, they would have much more health insurance, and they can make a lot more good decisions about their health.
Let me ask you a question. Do you are you opposed to or in favor of earmarks?
Well, it really does depend on the earmark itself. You know, just the way the earmark process has become now, there's a lot of you're just giving it to your friends, you're trying to bring something. If let's say you're having an earmark for a bridge, I think I would be supportive. If the state or the county or local level doesn't have the money for an infrastructure project, and they could really use it, you know, it's an essential project, I don't have any problem with the earmark supporting that essential project, essential infrastructure project, or something of a capital investment project. Rather than, and especially if you have some earmarks for research, like I'm always for it, expanding research, you know, National Institute of Health, any grants that you can increase, you know, the research, and you know, anything in biomedical research field. Anywhere you can get earmarks for those, or if you can get earmarks for infrastructure projects that are necessary in your district, I'm in favor of those earmarks. Like, let's say, I'll give you an example, like in the city of Daytona Beach, there's two bridges. There's a Main Street Bridge and an Orange Avenue Bridge. And there's a plumbing issue where they have clay pipes. So the clay pipes are more than 100 years old. So they essentially need replacement, or you're just asking, you know, they fix it up because they don't have the money at the local level. They just fix it up, they do temporary fixes. But essentially what you need those pipes to be replaced. The bridges are over 100 years old, and I travel on those bridges every day. What you're essentially doing, you're taping up these bridges, and you're just hoping that they don't collapse or you don't have a calamity on your hands. So what you can, if there's an earmark to say, let's get some of the federal dollars to help the local, let's say at local and state level, they can raise about 60–80% of the funds, and they need an additional 20% from the federal level for the project to go. I would be in favor of getting an earmark for that 20% to support a project at a local level.
Would you favor an earmark for like a building for a senior center?
If it's necessary in the community, yes. Any capital infrastructure projects that's necessary for the community. Let's say if you don't have a senior center, or the closest senior center is 7,500 miles away, especially in a retirement community like, you know, St. Augustine. There are a lot of retirees in Daytona Beach and Palm Coast. So, you know, if they don't have a senior, because I think in Palm Coast the only senior center they have is in Flagler Beach. They don't have one in Palm Coast itself. So if they wanted to have a senior center, but I would ask them to raise the funds on their own as well. See what level they can get, rather than just giving a blank check, oh, you want a senior center. I'll tell them, raise the funds in the community, try to see what you can get at the local and state level. And then, you know, if there's a gap between, you know, 20%, 25%, I don't have a problem funding that at the federal level. Rather than going and say, oh, we need a senior center, can you get 100% of the funds coming through at the federal level? I would much more, you know, using the earmarks project as a stopgap, you know, if you need an additional 20–30%, I'd be willing to do that at the federal level rather than giving the whole 100%.
You are seeking the Democratic Party nomination against somebody who was run twice before, somewhat known in the district. Why should Democrats vote for you over her?
Well, I would argue she's not well known in the district, but
well, I said somewhat.
Somewhat known. Well, I'll say because I've been campaigning for almost a year now. You know, I've gone to a lot of events, got a chance to meet a lot of the people. You know, I was at the African Cultural Center event, and it's almost about 6 months ago before she even declared she wanted to run. And I asked them, you know, at that point I was running against John Micah, you know, formidable opponent. And I asked them, you know, and they didn't even know that a Democrat even ran against John Micah in the last cycle. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that there are some, so I would kind of argue that she's not very well known. And then if you look at him, here's the difference between me and her. You know, there's Jacksonville Sun-Times, Matt Dixon with his blog, Politics Fix. He's kind of done a lot of stories and kind of laying out the background of, in her past, how she uses a nonprofit foundation. And she gets her 95%, and I was looking at the documents, 95% of her funding comes from the public level. And essentially, if you look at the salary, the top 3 employees take $250,000. And this is public money. This is the state of Florida money. So you're essentially using public money. And then she has a couple of senators who always go every year and try to raise taxes of the citizens of this state, so, alcohol and tobacco tax. And they wanted to essentially raise the taxes by $25 million, take all that $25 million and give it to that nonprofit. So, I'll let the voters decide what they think of that. And so essentially, and then if you go to our website, if you go to my website, I have basically every single issue listed. Even the most controversial one, I've listed and I've taken a stand. And I hope, nobody's going to look on every single issue and agree with me, even if you're a Democrat. But I would hope at least they would look at the issues, they will see if there's where I stand on the issues. So at least you will respect me for my issue. And like I said, I always emphasize, I'm running for this office to represent you. And if my community decides, we're not for this policy, I understand how you stand personally, I'm going to vote with the people rather than what I personally believe in, because that's what you're there to do. And I think a lot of congressmen forget that you're there to represent the people and represent your community, even though, it's always important to know how you personally feel on the issue. But your goal is to represent the views of your community. And if the community disagrees with me and they let me know, this is a policy and I would agree with it, I would not like you to vote this way, I will give them the option. And that's where, technological innovation can come into play. Now with the internet technologies, a lot of the voters can be active. And I would want the voters to have an active voice to let me know, and they can overrule, if it's a major issue coming up, I would like to give them the opportunity to have it essentially, instead of taking polls where you take 500 people, I would like to get every single voter in the district to kind of make a decision, and they can overturn my ruling. So if there's a healthcare debate, let's say if the healthcare issue is coming up, and they want to vote, they want to make their voices heard, I think we can do it technologically. It will be very cost effective, it won't cost as much. You get them, they can maybe use a voter registration number, they can use something, some sort of technological innovation where they can actually log in, go vote on the issue. And if the poll is 70% of people in my district that are opposed to this plan, I'm going to be voting with the people of my district rather than what I personally believe.
I must say you do have the most aggressive list of
issues
that I've ever seen.
Yeah, and if you go to my opponent's website, she hardly has anything. And if you try to find any specifics, nothing, especially on any. I think she has 4 issues, and there's not one detail I could find in her plan.
Let me ask you this. You started out by talking about the hyper-partisanship in Congress, and of course you're correct. No one's going to disagree with that. They may disagree whether it's good or bad or not, but and I read your issues. It appears that you are a liberal Democrat at a time when the Congress seems to be leaning to the right. Where would you find the middle ground where you could work with people both in your own party and people who are in the other party to try and get?
I think I would personally describe myself as a moderate. Mm-hmm. On some of the social issues, I might be maybe a little bit more than moderate, maybe on the liberal side. But on the economic, I look at the model, how to balance the budget. My model is Bill Clinton. You look at President Clinton, what he did. You balance the budget by growing the economy, and that's where I can find a lot of bipartisan agreement. If you talk to business leaders and you tell them, how do you improve the economy? The simple answer is you have to grow the economy, and I think that's where I can find a lot of agreement with the Republicans in Congress. If you're going to talk about infrastructure projects, especially if the projects are needed. See, that you can't just do infrastructure and just spend money for the sake of spending money. Mm-hmm. If the projects are essentially needed in your district, in your community, if you drive down I-95, drive across this country, there's a lot of bridges who are over 100 years old, they're falling apart. Those bridges need to be rebuilt. So I think we can come to some sort of agreement with the Republicans of how we can build these bridges. There's President Obama proposed an infrastructure branch. You can have a public-private partnerships. Now, there's a lot of ways we can work. Republicans don't have all bad ideas. You can look at some of the Republicans' proposals with public-private partnerships, and I think you can be very successful there on the infrastructure projects. Anytime you propose tax cuts, and like how can you lure these high-tech industries to come in the district? You can emphasize that for Florida, no personal income tax. Then you can, on the federal level, you can give them tax incentives. And I'm in favor of doing corporate tax reform. So that's where you can find a lot of bipartisan agreement with the Republicans who want to do the corporate tax reform. Because right now, essentially, the system is designed So where all these corporations and these Fortune 500 companies who can afford the team of accountants, team of lobbyists, they get all these special perks. Whereas if you're a small business owner, you'll be lucky if you can afford a CPA who can do your accounting rather than doing the accounting yourself or having someone else do it. So that's where if you make the system more fair, especially on the corporate level, I think that's where we can find a lot of bipartisan agreement of lowering the tax rate on the corporate level and kind of evening the playing field. So whereas all these corporations are not getting all the tax benefits. And I think that's where we can find bipartisan agreement, especially on the economy. If you actually read of how I want to propose of fixing the economy, you'll see a lot of these ideas are taking the tax cut of not having all their profits if you open a new manufacturing plant using your own capital, you don't pay any taxes for 3 years. That is a Republican idea, and I'll give them credit for that. Those ideas work. China's been using it, Brazil uses it. All these countries who are developing world, they're using these ideas to lure all this capital away from the Western world. And I think if you learn from them, use the tax cuts, and you target them for the industries that you really want in your country rather than giving them a handout. If you target the industry and you structure the tax cuts properly, I think you can have a lot of structural growth in our country.
Okay, I've been talking too much. Turn the floor to you guys.
Margo?
I noticed down here you have education as one of your priorities. And I noticed that we have had a lot of federal money coming in this year and Race to the Top,
Yeah.
the $700 million program. So are you concerned that Head Start might go away because you've got proposal to fund early childhood at a higher level? Does that concern you because you have such as Head Start, but...
Yeah, Head Start, Race to the Top, anytime you can get early childhood education, especially in the poor and less affluent neighborhoods where they don't have access to that high-level education, where if you can bring those into those communities, and if you look at the statistics, if you get the kids starting to read and doing math problems earlier in life, they're going to be much more successful when they enter kindergarten and then elementary school. So any money that you spend in early childhood education, I think pays great dividends when you go higher up the chain, when they go to middle school and high school.
Right.
So any funding that you can provide for early childhood education, especially if you target that funding in less affluent neighborhoods, where let's be realistic. If you're coming from a wealthy family, you're going to have the options available for you. You can do private tutoring. You can send the kids. They have academies where these kids go before kindergarten and they learn to read and write. So when they're coming into kindergarten and first grade, they're all well advanced than the people in lower level communities where they don't have the same resources. So if you bring these Head Start and early education programs into these communities, they pay great dividends. And that's where the whole education reform. Here's how I see education reform going. First, you fund early childhood education like we talked about. Then you provide the resources for these kids, who come from less affluent neighborhoods where they can't afford like the Sylvian Learning Center or some of these other technologies that are available to the higher, more affluent students. So if you provide, one-on-one tutoring, mentoring programs, so if you bring these after-school programs where they can get tutoring, where they can learn other skills, and they can go to arts and other programs, get a diversified interest. So they're tied to their school. They actually want to come to school every day. So that's where I think you can do a lot of great things with early childhood education, funding good after-school programs. Then when you get to a high school, and I think that's where the divergent goes. Whereas a lot of people, elementary school, if you look at a lot of the statistics, most of the kids do great in the reading level in elementary school. I think middle school, that's when you start to lose a lot of kids, whereas they can't keep up or they can't maintain the level of reading, and that's where tutoring and mentoring programs can really help. Then at high school, most of our education system is either targeted, so we want to help these AP and IB students, which is great. I was an IB student. So, you have a lot of these programs that are targeted, and I want to continue funding those programs. But you have to have a good, robust system because not everyone wants to go to college. And not everyone can afford to go to college straight out of high school. So you have to have a good program for these students. You have to show them what is in it for them. Rather than just sports or after school program. Show them, if you have a good vocational program. And that's where these industries are very important. If you bring these high-tech industries, and some of these community colleges with the ITT Tech and other community colleges, they give you special technical skills. If you can start giving these to students in around like the 10th grade, when they can drive, they're free to move around. So basically split their day in half and make them go to the same high school. So, they have the friend circle, they have incentive to go to school. And they'll take basic English, math, science, and reading classes in the morning, go to lunch, and after lunch, bring these industries in place, have partnerships with these industries. So if you're gonna have a manufacturing plant, get these people who are in high schools, they need a job, a lot of people work after school. Get them so they'll go to this manufacturing plant, they'll get training. So essentially at 18 they can start working. Or they can go to the local community college, get some technical skills, like, if you want to be in the IT sector, get technical skills. If you want to be a nurse, you can start doing that in high school. So that incentivizes a lot more people to stay in school. And essentially, by when you get out and you graduate from high school, you're not only going to graduate at 18, you're going to have technical skills as well from maybe in a practical job or with a community college. So you have essentially a dual degree coming out of high school. Yeah. And that'll incentivize a lot more people to stay in school and continue.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off,
yes.
But this is at a time when the state is cutting back on state-required funding to school districts to improve programming and otherwise. So the federal government, I guess, where's the money going to come from if the state says they can't afford?
Well, if the state can't afford it, I'm much more in favor of, you find a program. Let's say you want to fund the Head Start program.
Let's talk about job creation and what benefit vocational and high school and post-secondary programs would have. Okay,
so here's how you fund it from the federal level. First, you ask your local communities, find the local community college, find the industry that's prevalent, that's where the future job growth is going to be. So you find those industries, you develop partnerships with them, develop a training program. So you can take these students who don't want to go to college right away, tell them, we have a partnerships, like in my hometown, Daytona Beach, you have the Daytona Beach Community College. You have Flagler College here in St. Augustine. So, you make partnerships with these colleges and tell them, at a lower cost, would you be willing to teach some of our high school students? And some of the funding levels, if the funding is not going to come from the state level, we'll get you the funding from the federal level. Are you willing to take the responsibility of training these high school students and to get them a degree and actually have a degree program set up so when they will come out of this, let's say if it's a 2-year program, they'll actually have the degree in their hand. So they can transition into the job market rather than just being a program, it'll be an actual degree. So that's where you have to have the partnerships with the colleges and the universities to see if they're willing to. And almost every part of the district, they have at least one university or community college, which I think you can partner with. And if you develop that partnerships, you develop a program. Let's say if you have a service industry, you have an IT industry, and you want to create that program, and you show, here's our program, here's what these kids are going to go 2 years, here's their plan, they're going to get some job training at this plant or this facility or this company, and plus they're going to come out with this degree. I think once you have those partnerships in place, I would be happy to fund those programs at the federal level. And I think if the state is not willing to take their responsibility of funding, because it's in the best interest of the state as well, if you can get these people into a good job market. And think about it, if they get a higher paying job getting straight out of high school, they're going to be pay more in taxes, they're going to buy more services, they will be able to afford more housing, and so you won't have to provide much of the state level aid where you usually have to for some of these low income families, and they can be kind of less dependent on the system and be more dependent on themselves.
Okay.
Question. You talk about incentives for bringing industry and manufacturing, and yet you also talk about corporate tax reform. How do you see those two? Because you're talking about changing the tax structure or providing subsidies, tax incentives for manufacturing, but at the same time closing loopholes, lobbyist efforts for those that exist. How does that work together?
Sure. To bring those industries in place, like I mentioned, there's $3 trillion of capital that's sitting outside of this country and it's just waiting to be spent. And where you can have the corporate tax reform is right now they pay 35%. They want to bring this money back, and that's the main reason a lot of these companies are keeping these money offshore. So you tell them, you have a $3 trillion. We can really use it in our economy today. We don't want you to bring this money back 2-3 years from now. We want you to bring this money today and start spending in our economy. What is it going to take? It's going to take lower taxes. So, find out a solution. If you invest the capital, because you have to value how much that capital is. The capital has a value if you bring it back and you give it out as dividends or you buy back stock. Because you're still spending money in our economy, and if you pay out a dividend, they're going to be ending up paying taxes on those dividends. So any capital that you bring back in the United States, it has value. So maybe we can lower the tax rate to 10% if you bring back the money and you spent that money within 1 year. And whether you want to spend it buying back stock, giving out capital, giving out dividends, that choice is yours. But if you're going to take that money and you're going to invest in our community, you're going to build a new manufacturing plant, you're going to bring a new industry, you're going to open a new biomedical research facility. If you bring that capital, that's where the capital is most valuable. So for that, to bring that, I would be even willing to give you a 0% to bring all that money back. That's where the corporate tax reform comes into place. Then on the broader level of corporate tax reform. So that's how you kind of lure these industries. What my target is to bring this capital that's sitting offshore, the $2 trillion, and I want this money to be spent in the United States within 1 year. No matter how you want us to do it as dividends, you're going to end up paying a little bit more taxes on that. You're going to pay 10% because that's not as valuable as opening the actual plant and getting, like, let's say 1,000, 2,000 people a job in the community. Whereas dividend, it has value where money comes back in the federal government. So I would still incentivize that to lower the tax rate and bring that money back. Then on a broader level, like I mentioned, a small business owner, some of them pay more taxes than, if you looked at the report in 2008, GE, some of these Fortune 500 companies ended up paying $0 in taxes in 2008. And if you're a small business owner, like if you have a shop, you're your mom and pop shop, you're going to end up paying taxes. There's no way you can ever bring your tax revenue to $0. Where some of these corporations, they've gotten so many loopholes. And they have the accounts, the accountants don't make their money for no reason. They have a team of accountants in a room sitting like this deciding how they're going to save GE money and what loophole we need to get them to save money. And if you have a broader tax rate, and I think that's where corporate level, if you're in a corporation and you're trying to get a broader the tax base and you kind of lower the rates and kind of have a flat rate system, I think that can work well at a corporate level. Whereas in individual level, you have to worry about the progressive tax system and why it might hurt a small family to have a flat tax rate. But at corporate level,
those who argue once you get them here with the incentives and then you don't maintain the incentives that you already have in place, that they'll just leave again.
Well, that's why you structure a 6-year. So if you're investing capital first, that's where you have to structure the capital so you have an incentive in place. So first year, second year. So if you're spending, let's say, if you're going to build a factory and you're using your own capital, that's where, so no government money is being spent. So you're going to spend your own money to build a new factory. You're going to employ 1,000 people, and then you're going to pay taxes on the first year, second year, and third year, and then you're going to get those tax incentive backs. But the company is going to be profitable. You're not going to spend a lot of your capital if the business model is not going to be profitable. Mm-hmm. I don't think the companies are not that interested in the tax incentive. They'd rather just leave the money offshore if that's their entire plan. So if they're going to make a 6-year business plan to run a factory, they're going to assume the factory is going to be profitable, and I'm hoping their business sense that they will create a long-term plan. It incentivizes them to have a long-term plan. So if you have a 6-year business plan, you can even make it a 10-year business plan. Whatever the incentive you need, you can do the research to see if the factory's been operating for at least this many years. The chances of the factory going down is much less. So you find out that magic number, whatever it is, 5 years, 6 years, and you find out, and you encourage all these companies to invest the money now. And they're investing their own capital, no tax reserve, and you don't lose any tax revenue for the first 3 years. And it's only on their third year, or it's only on their fourth years they start to get some of those rebates. And I would hope, that's the ingenuity of the American people. I'm hoping, like, if somebody has capital sitting, they invest their own capital. They build one factory. I'm hoping they will use the tax incentives on the third, fourth, and fifth year to expand and build a second factory. That's the real incentive for them to grow their business, and that's where you want to have to see growth. So that's what I'm hoping for. The business people will be smart enough that their whole goal is not to just get a tax credit. Their goal is to kind of improve the economy and plus profit at the same time.
Okay.
Emily?
Mario, any more?
No, I think.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever served on an elected or appointed board or commission?
No elected positions.
How well do you know St. Johns County?
I visited the county multiple times. I've walked on the streets. I know a lot of people in St. Augustine. Went to the St. Augustine parade. I've been talking to a lot of people, and it's a beautiful historic city. I came here with my friends in college, go to St. Augustine Beach. So what I see is city of St. Augustine. It's a historic city. You have a lot of retirees here. So you have the retirees. Plus, I think if you diversify the economy of St. Johns County, especially in the northeast suburbs, I think that's where you have a lot of potential Whereas if you bring another industry into place, you can help those suburbs grow even more. Whereas if you bring another industry, you have a lot of land. If you drive down US 1 just going from Daytona Beach, you have a lot of land available where you can have a manufacturing and the county can grow on its own, and it can be a natural growth by bringing in industry and growing from the ground level up. So rather than having the burdens, and then you can lower the property taxes for the seniors who are living in the community. If you have other industries that can support the county itself.
I just share. Yes, we do have a retirement community, but we also have 31,000 students in the school system, and they're from young families.
No.
We're much younger and community than one would think, and you mentioned the northwest part of this county.
And that's what I want. I want those students. I want those students who grow up in the suburbs, go to the nice public schools, then go to maybe University of North Florida, University of Gainesville, Florida State, get the engineering and technical skills, come back in those suburbs and start companies. That's what I want, and that's where I want the incentives in place. Get access to capital, because a lot of these corporations, if they have the access to capital, and you can incentivize these companies to be like venture capitalists, to invest capital on funding these young brilliant students. We're living in the technological age where you can make a website and it can generate $1 billion like we saw on Facebook. So I want to incentivize these people who are getting high advanced degrees to come back into their communities and start to create jobs in the communities themselves. And come back, follow the model like I did. You grow up, in the northwest part of the county, go to University of Florida, Gainesville, or University of North Florida, wherever would you like to go, and come back in your community and start a business. I think that's where you're going to see real growth. And if you have the environment, if you're creating an environment, let's say, just because you build one manufacturing plant, you have to think about it this way. If you build a manufacturing plant, that manufacturing plant is going to need supplies. And a lot of small business owners are going to pop up there, just going to supply, on the short end. If they run out of this supply, they'll supply them. And then you have a lot of restaurants open up that are going to need service to people who work there. And these people are going to need housing. And once you have one industry in place, then you have concurrent industries that are kind of tied in with that industry, and a lot more move. So just to create that spark, I think we can create the spark at the federal level. The rest of the business community will take care of it on its own. So if you have a biomedical research facility, you're probably going to have hospitals. You're going to have a lot of doctors who will come in, will start research in that facility, and you'll open a lot more doctor offices. And you'll have the companies that make the actual equipment. They will move much closer to the place where you're doing the research, so they can supply them with goods. Then you're going to have the technicians pop up who are going to repair the equipment. So then the list goes on, and a lot more people come in, a lot more people need services, and that's how you kind of grow the economy. And that's my real target, is to create that spark. And we have to get, like I said, you don't need any government funding. This capital is sitting out there offshore. My main target is to bring that capital and spend it as much money as I can get into the district itself. That's my real goal. Get the money into the district, and other congressmen will fight for their districts. But my goal is to bring it in, St. Johns County, Volusia County, Putnam, and Flagler County. That's my real goal. Okay.
All right. Any closing remarks?
Well, I'd just like to thank all of you. I'm always open, and I'd just like to let you know a little my campaign strategy. I'm a grassroots campaigner. I can't qualify on the ballot by getting signatures. Requires a lot of knocking on doors, going to meet a lot of people, and there are a lot of Republicans in there. And like I said, here's where I can be greatly bipartisan. When it comes to the economy, I share a lot of the ideas. I'm a small business owner myself. My parents are small business owners. I come from a family of small business owners. So our target is, how can we make the economy work for a small business owner? How can we take ingenuity of the American people and kind of create that spark? And that's what I really want to do. I want to make the economy work for the small business owner, just like the economy's worked really well for the Fortune 500 companies if you look at the trend for the past 20 years. I want to do the same kind of level of ingenuity for the small business owner. That's my real target. A lot of people talk about helping the small business community, but then to them a small business community is GE. When they get into Congress, they start getting all the loopholes, all the tax credits to them. And that's where we kind of lose faith. And a lot of these people talk about small business owners, and they don't understand. They're like, oh, you're going to tax GE 1% more. And I'm not saying I'm going to tax GE 1% more. I'm just giving an example. If you talk about raising maybe revenues, and you can raise revenues without raising taxes. Here's the biggest lie. Because if you lower down the rates and you close some of the loopholes, you can raise additional revenue, and you just lowered the tax rate. I think that's what Ronald Reagan did. You can lower the tax rate and still raise more revenue, and that's what he proved. So if you take some of the philosophies of the Republican philosophies of how you can raise additional revenue, because that's our real target. My target is not to tax people more. Target is, government needs some little additional revenue. And I'm hoping, if the additional revenue comes in, additional revenue will come from growth rather than taxing people more. And I want to lower taxes as much as I can on small business owners and the middle class families. That's my real target. And at the same time, create a spark in the community to kind of help the economy grow naturally on its own.